The kingdom beneath our feet. What if every step you take is not upon solid ground, but upon the roof of an empire you never see? Imagine the earth beneath your shoes not as dirt or clay, but as a cathedral carved in silence, a labyrinth of chambers and roads alive with a population that dwarfs our largest cities. And small, fragile, almost invisible to daily human life, have been building these hidden realms for more than 100 million years. And perhaps the strangest truth of all, they may have already achieved what we humans still struggle to master: unity, efficiency, survival as one superorganism. Close your eyes and picture this: a cross-section of the soil. At first, it looks like nothing but roots and stones. Then, slowly, tunnels appear. They twist downward in elegant spirals, connecting to chambers wide enough to cradle thousands of tiny bodies. Imagine galleries stacked like floors of a skyscraper, nurseries filled with eggs, food vaults brimming with seeds or pieces of prey, and chambers where the queen, the beating heart of the colony, lies hidden. Scientists who pour molten metal into abandoned nests to capture their architecture have unearthed structures that look less like burrows and more like alien cities. Shining towers of aluminum, branching like lungs, spiraling like ancient temples. The first architects of Earth may not have been humans at all, but ants. Step back for a moment and think of how we describe ourselves. We build nations. We organize into classes. We create agriculture, wage war, enslave others, invent symbols to communicate, and sacrifice individuals for the survival of the whole. But all these things empire, hierarchy, farming, slavery, or ants were doing long before us. They do not act as individuals. They act as cells in a larger body, a collective intelligence scientists call a superorganism. One ant is nothing. 10,000 ants are a mind. In this underground world, the rules are not written in books but in chemicals. A worker ant brushes past another and leaves a trace of pheromone, invisible ink that says, "This is the way to food." A soldier's alarm pheromone is a war trumpet, invisible but deafening to its colony. The queen does not bark orders. Her scent radiates authority, a chemical crown reminding every ant of her presence. You, as a single human, rely on words and laws to coordinate. Ants use nothing but scent, yet somehow achieve coordination that rivals our own. Consider the scale. Some colonies stretch across miles. The Argentine ant, an invasive species, has created a super colony along the Mediterranean coast, billions of ants across thousands of kilometers, all recognizing each other as kin, cooperating as if the earth itself were their shared city. No human empire has ever reached that level of cohesion. Rome crumbled, dynasties rose and fell, but the ants, they continued, their empires spanning continents, united not by treaties but by chemistry. It raises an unsettling question. What is civilization, really? Is it writing stone and fire, or is it the ability of thousands, even millions, to act as one? If the latter, then perhaps ants, not humans, were the first civilization on Earth. When you think of history, you recall the pyramids, the Great Wall, or the ruins of forgotten cities. But imagine if future archaeologists dug into the soil and cataloged ant nests with the same reverence. Would they see our skyscrapers as mere copies of what ants perfected underground? Now, imagine walking in a meadow at night. The stars above remind you of empires of the cosmos, galaxies swirling in silence. Beneath your feet, the ants mirror this cosmic order, their tunnels like constellations in the soil. Above, the universe expands, below colonies thrive. Two scales of existence, both vast, both ancient, and you, the human, caught in between, mostly unaware. But ants are not only engineers, they are also philosophers of survival. They understand instinctively that the individual is expendable, but the colony must endure. A single ant will give its life without hesitation, becoming a living barricade, a plug for a tunnel, a drop of acid against an invader. To us, such sacrifice is heroic, exceptional. To ants, it is routine. Perhaps what we call heroism, they call biology. There is a quiet irony here. We pride ourselves on culture, science, and reason. Yet ants, without reason, without culture, build something eerily similar to our greatest achievements. They cultivate fungi as crops, keeping them safe underground, feeding them with cut leaves. They herd aphids like cattle, milking them for honeydew. They fight wars over territory and slave rivals, and create vast hierarchies of workers, soldiers, and royalty. And unlike us, they do not debate or dissent. The system simply works, because it is written into their DNA. And here lies the eerie thought. What if civilization is not unique to humans? What if civilization is a pattern, a law of life itself emerging wherever cooperation cannot compete isolation? If so, then ants are not just insects. They are a mirror held up to our species, showing us both what we are and what we might become. They remind us that intelligence is not the only path to dominance. Unity is, and in unity, ants have no equal. Perhaps the next time you feel the soil crunch underfoot, you should hesitate, for beneath you is not dirt, but a kingdom, a breathing organism, a history millions of years old. And perhaps, just perhaps, the first true empire of Earth does not belong to us, but to them.
Beneath every step lies a hidden empire.
Wars without mercy. What is war? For humans, it is tanks and treaties, soldiers and generals, victory written in blood and ash. For ants, war is older, raw, and far more merciless. Their battles are not fought for glory or ideology, but for survival itself. When ants go to war, they do so with a brutality that makes our own conflicts look strangely restrained. No negotiation, no mercy, only chemical signals of rage and endless waves of bodies crashing into one another. Imagine a field at dawn. Dew clings to the grass, the silence is almost holy, and then movement. From two sides, lines of ants emerge, dark rivers of tiny bodies converging on the same patch of earth. They are not lost wanderers. They are armies. To the human eye, they seem like black smudges on the ground, but kneel down, magnify, and you see the chaos. Mandibles snapping, bodies grappling, acid spraying, venom injected. Thousands upon thousands of ants tearing into each other with tireless resolve. It is a war without end, without remorse, and without survivors. Take the army ants of Central and South America. They do not build permanent nests. Instead, they are nomads, forever marching, forever hunting. At night, they form bivouacs, living walls made of their own bodies, locking legs together into a fortress of flesh. By day, they swarm in columns so dense they look like rivers flowing across the jungle floor. Anything in their path, insects, spiders, frogs, even small birds, is overwhelmed, stripped clean in minutes. Now picture two such armies colliding. What happens when a river meets another river? The ground itself becomes a battlefield of annihilation. Or consider the fire ants, infamous for their venomous sting, burning like fire beneath human skin. When two colonies of fire ants clash, they fight not only for territory, but for survival of the entire hive. Soldiers lock jaws with enemies, refusing to release even in death, their bodies forming grotesque chains of corpses. Acid and venom cloud the air, invisible to us, but suffocating to them. And when the battle is done, the ground is littered with the dead, a carpet of sacrifice. To the victors go the spoils, food, land, and the continuation of their bloodline. There is no Geneva Convention in the world of ants. No rules of engagement, No consideration for civilians, for in truth every ant is both civilian and soldier. Colonies invest heavily in their workers and soldiers, breeding them in staggering numbers, knowing most will never see the end of their lives. They are designed for war, born to die. What we call tragedy, they call instinct. But not all ant wars are frontal assaults. Some are wars of infiltration, subtle and sinister. There exist slave-making ants that do not simply kill their enemies, they enslave them. These raiders attack nearby colonies, stealing pupae and carrying them back home. When the stolen young hatch, they do not realize they are captives. They work as if they were born into this alien colony, feeding and caring for their masters. Entire ant societies have risen on the backs of enslaved labor, eerily mirroring the darkest chapters of human history. The line between insect and empire becomes disturbingly thin, and yet the strategies ants employ in war reveal a kind of genius that transcends their size. Some ants use chemical espionage, secreting scents that confuse their enemies, masking themselves as friends. Others practice scorched earth tactics, releasing chemicals so toxic that entire battlefields become uninhabitable. Trapjaw ants strike with jaws so fast they can snap enemies in half or launch themselves backward like living projectiles. Even the so-called exploding ants of Southeast Asia have evolved a final act of defiance, rupturing their own bodies to release a goo-like substance that immobilizes attackers, turning their death into a weapon. Does this sound familiar? Kamikaze pilots, chemical warfare, propaganda, slavery, all inventions we claim as uniquely human, yet the ants were there first. They have perfected these tactics not over centuries, but over millions of years of evolution. For them, war is not a failure of diplomacy. War is diplomacy. It is how borders are drawn, how resources are allocated, how empires rise and fall. Perhaps the most chilling example is the supercolony of Argentine ants in southern Europe. Billions of ants stretching across nations, all genetically similar, all recognizing each other as part of the same vast hive. When they meet outsiders, however, even other Argentine ants from different colonies, the violence is apocalyptic. Researchers have observed battlefields where millions die in a single day, tiny corpses piled like leaves after a storm. Imagine if human nations had populations in the billions, all willing to sacrifice themselves in endless trench wars. The scale is almost incomprehensible. But what does this teach us? That war, stripped of ideology, is about territory, food, and survival. Ants fight because the ground is finite, because resources are scarce, because life is competition. In their wars, we see a mirror of our own. When we fight over oil, land, or water, are we so different? Perhaps the unsettling truth is that our civilizations are just more elaborate versions of ant colonies, driven by the same biological imperative. Secure resources, expand territory, outlast the enemy. Now imagine this, a planet where humans vanish and only ants remain. Would their wars cease? Or would they continue endlessly, reshaping the earth one battle at a time? Would the soil itself become a graveyard of empires, a silent record of conflicts too small for human eyes? If history is written by the victors, then perhaps the ants have been writing history all along, not in books or monuments, but in pheromones and scars etched into the ground. And maybe, just maybe, the first true wars of Earth were not fought by humans, but by them. And those wars, unlike ours, have never ended. They rage on, silent and unseen, beneath the grass, beneath our feet, reminding us that mercy is a human invention, and one the ants never needed. Architects of survival. Picture a world where every breath of wind, every drop of rain, every rise of the sun is a test of survival. For most creatures, adaptation is trial and error, an endless gamble across generations. But ants, tiny as they are, have perfected survival through architecture, not buildings of stone and glass like ours, but living structures of soil, silk, and even their own bodies. They are not simply survivors. They are engineers of existence, architects whose designs outlast storms, floods, and droughts. Their resilience lies not in strength, but in construction. Imagine again that cross-section of soil, this time not as a battlefield, but as a masterpiece of design. Tunnels curve not randomly, but with purpose, allowing airflow deep underground. At certain points, the passages widen into bulbous chambers, nurseries, granaries, resting quarters. Some species even construct chimneys and ventilation shafts that regulate temperature, keeping the queen and brood in a climate-controlled haven. Where we humans use air conditioners and thermostats, ants use geometry and physics written into their instinct. Their blueprints are chemical whispers, yet the results rival our most advanced engineering. Take the leafcutter ants of South America. Their nests sprawl underground in sprawling networks that can house millions. Within, they do not simply store food, they farm it. Workers cut leaves into fragments and carry them home, not to eat directly, but to feed a hidden crop, fungus. They chew the leaves into pulp, fertilize it, and tend it like gardeners. This fungus is their bread, their rice, their sustenance. In a very real sense, leafcutter ants are farmers practicing agriculture millions of years before humans ever planted wheat. They prune, they weed, they even use antimicrobial secretions to prevent fungal disease. Entire civilizations sustained by crops underground, invisible to the surface world. Now picture the weaver ants of Southeast Asia. High in the canopy, they do not dig or farm, they sew. Using the silk of their own larvae, they weave leaves together, stitching vast chambers suspended in the air. Soldiers guard the entrances, while workers carry larvae like tools, squeezing silk onto leaf edges to bind them. The result is a fortress of green swaying with the wind but unbroken. Humans invented sewing with needles. Ants invented it with their children. Then consider the fire ants, those infamous red warriors of the floodplains. When rains swell rivers and water drowns the land, most creatures flee. But fire ants link their bodies together, forming living rafts. They cling to each other with mandibles and legs, trapping air between them, creating a buoyant platform that can drift for weeks. Atop this raft, the queen rests safe, workers ferry brood to higher ground, and the colony survives. Imagine an entire city transforming itself into a boat, buildings melting into flesh and bone to ride the flood. For ants, this is no fantasy. It is instinct. Where we build lifeboats, they become them. And yet, their architectural genius is not only about survival. It is about conquest. Some ants build towers of soil at nest entrances, spires that act like lighthouses, broadcasting their presence. Others construct elaborate trails across branches, highways of pheromones guiding endless traffic of workers. Certain desert ants sculpt nests with reflective surfaces that deflect the brutal heat, keeping their chambers cool beneath scorching suns. Each innovation is a solution carved by evolution, tested in the theater of survival for millions of years. Ants fail, but colonies endure, refining designs across generations until only perfection remains. But there is something uncanny about this. Ants do not think as we do. No architect draws the plan. No engineer calculates airflow. And yet, collectively, they achieve feats of design we struggle to match. This phenomenon, emergent intelligence, suggests that complexity can arise not from genius, but from simple rules repeated endlessly by thousands. One ant digs forward when it smells a trail. Another deposits soil where light filters in. Over time, these micro-decisions create macro-structures, elegant as cathedrals, functional as machines. Is this not, in its own way, another form of intelligence? Now, imagine applying this principle to our own world. Human cities often crumble under disaster, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes. We design, we plan, but we remain vulnerable. Ants, without architects, endure catastrophes by becoming architecture
This infrared
themselves.
visualization
Perhaps in their
is a key
silence
part of
lies a
our
lesson.
explanatory
Survival
captions.
does not depend on resisting nature, but on yielding to it, weaving with it, flowing like water through soil and root. Ants build not against the world, but with it. Yet their resilience also has a darker side. Invasive ants, like the Argentine species, spread by creating sprawling supercolonies that override native species. Their architecture is not just physical but ecological, reshaping entire landscapes by sheer presence. They build not monuments, but dominance, not temples, but territories. In their endless expansion, they remind us that survival for one species often means extinction for another. Architecture, for ants, is not only about life, it is also about power. Step back once more and reflect. To us, architecture is art, a record of culture and vision. For ants, architecture is survival, written not in stone but in soil, leaf, and body. And yet both share a common truth. To build is to live, to endure, to leave behind something that says, we were here. Perhaps in this, humans and ants are not so different. Our skyscrapers and their tunnels are parallel answers to the same question. How do we last in a world designed to erase us? And so, when you see a mound rising quietly in the grass, do not dismiss it as dirt. It is a fortress, a farm, a boat, a city. It is proof that survival is not brute force, but design. And in that design, ants stand as architects of a hidden world, a world that endures long after ours may crumble. The shadow civilization. What if the true rulers of Earth are not humans at all? What if beneath our feet, another civilization has thrived for millions of years, hidden yet omnipresent, a shadow that mirrors us in ways both fascinating and unsettling? We call them ants, but perhaps the word is too small, for when viewed from the right distance, a colony is not just insects, it is a nation, an empire, a civilization in miniature, and perhaps a prophecy of what life looks like when survival, not individuality, is the highest law. Pause for a moment and picture the world without us. Imagine cities crumbling, highways cracking, skyscrapers hollowing out as vines weave through steel. Now, shift your gaze to the ground. The ants remain. They do not mourn us, for they never depended on us. If anything, they may thrive more without our interference. Their tunnels stretch further, their supercolonies expand across continents. Their wars redraw invisible maps beneath the soil. In time, they might become the most enduring civilization Earth has ever known. The question we must ask is unsettling. What defines civilization? If it is writing, perhaps we are unique. If it is art, perhaps we stand alone. But if civilization is defined by scale, organization, agriculture, warfare, and survival across epochs, then the ants were here long before us, and they will remain long after. Their architecture rivals our cities. Their agriculture predates ours. Their wars are more relentless. Their communication, though chemical rather than verbal, is flawless in execution. When stripped of poetry and monuments, civilization is about endurance, and on that scale, the ants are masters. Consider the eerie parallels. We build metropolises. They carve underground labyrinths. We have emperors and presidents. They have queens ruling through invisible crowns of pheromones. We write treaties. They wage wars. We enslave. So do they. We farm crops. They farm fungi. We herd cattle. They herd aphids. What we call invention, they call instinct. And what we fear as chaos, they embrace as order. Are we not simply a larger echo of their smaller, older empire? There is a concept in philosophy called the superorganism, the idea that an entire colony functions as one living being, each ant a cell in a greater body. Now imagine Earth itself, where ants number in the quadrillions, their combined biomass outweighing all wild birds and mammals. Could it be that the planet is already run by a living superorganism, only too small for us to recognize? Perhaps the ants do not need individuality, because they have transcended it. They live not as I but as we. And in that unity lies a form of power we struggle to match. Our history is filled with collapse. Rome, the Maya, Mesopotamia, all great human empires eventually crumble. But ants? Their civilizations rise, fall, and rise again endlessly. If one colony dies, another thrives. If one species declines, another expands. Their story is not of rise and fall, but of constant presence. They do not vanish. They adapt. They persist. In the great ledger of Earth's civilizations, perhaps we are just a brief entry, and they are the endless narrative. Yet their civilization is alien to us in one crucial way. Humans celebrate the individual. We write names on monuments, sculpt faces in stone, preserve stories of heroes. Ants do none of this. No single ant matters. Only the colony matters. They erase individuality for the sake of survival. And here lies the paradox. We who treasure the self may burn out as individuals, while they who erase the self may endure forever. It is a thought both humbling and terrifying. What lessons do they hold for us? Perhaps unity is stronger than genius. Perhaps endurance is greater than ambition. Or perhaps the ants remind us of our own fragility, that civilization, no matter how advanced, is always vulnerable. We build walls and governments, but collapse lurks in famine, war, and disease. Ants, too, collapse, but their collapse is never total. Their shadow civilization always rises again. If resilience is the true mark of greatness, then the ants wear the crown of earth. So the next time you see a trail of ants crossing your kitchen floor, resist the urge to dismiss them as pests. They are emissaries of a hidden empire, ambassadors of a civilization that has thrived for 100 million years. They do not beg for recognition, but they deserve all. For in their shadows we may glimpse our own future or our inevitable replacement. And perhaps the greatest irony is this. We look to the stars, dreaming of colonizing other planets, building empires among the cosmos. But beneath us lies a civilization that has already achieved what we long for: expansion, survival, unity. We ask, who will rule the stars? The ants remind us to first ask, who truly rules the earth? Perhaps the first empire was not ours. Perhaps the final empire will not be ours either. Perhaps the shadow civilization has been here all along, silent, relentless, eternal.